Hi, my name is Luc Piguet. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of ClearSpace. ClearSpace is a Swiss startup that works on the big problem of removing space junk from space. We have been founded in 2018 and have won over the couple last 2 years a large contract with the European Space Agency. Today, we're about a little more than 30 FTEs of mostly engineers working on our space mission, together with a large industrial team of about 20 different European companies. Now, I just wanted to give you some perspective about innovation and how innovation evolves over time. And to do that, I'd like you to just imagine that you live in a world, an utopia world where there's no cars. There's no cars and there's no infrastructure to transport people, and you just invented the first car. What would people say to you? You would think about this is a fantastic innovation. This is something amazing. It will give people freedom to go wherever they want. It will make it possible even later, maybe to transport goods and bring businesses closer together. Make it possible for businesses to bring their goods to their customers. Or it will make it possible for people to go wherever they want in general, or to go see people that are further away. And at that time, what people would tell you, they would tell you, this is absolutely crazy. It cannot work. It's impossible. Nobody would ever buy that. There's no roads. There's no way this can happen, because you would need to build roads everywhere around the world to make a business case like this work. So it doesn't work. So it's not possible. And if you fast forward a few years later, the infrastructure we have today looks like that. So the road transportation is what everybody uses. It's just a new normal. It's the way things are done. Is the way of transportation which is the most used for people and for good everywhere around the world. And it offers a lot of possibilities, to the point where you can start inventing new business cases on the road infrastructure, like taxi services, or starting to think, okay, why should I drive my own car? I can drive the car of somebody else, through a rental, through a taxi service, or through Uber, for example. So it's really hard to look forward and to imagine how things change, and it's really difficult to get a clear view into what will be the industries of tomorrow. I mean, we're really good at rationalizing the past, but we're very bad at predicting the future. And in the space industry, a little the same happened. About 60 years ago, a bunch of people decided they're going to launch a satellite around Earth, and it would send back signals to Earth. And this industry would rapidly evolve over time. I mean, it took quite some time. It took 60 years, but essentially 60 years where Earth orbits went from something like that to something like this. This is the trace of all the orbits that are published in the Space Track database. Those are orbits of every satellite and debris around Earth that are observed with radars by the US Space Force. And probably there's a few more objects, because there are certainly classified objects, but it gives a little idea how the space industry evolved over the past year. And today we are at the verge of a dramatic acceleration in this industry. To give you some dimension to that, between 2010 and 2020, the number of satellites we launch every year multiplied by 16. So it's a massive highway network. So the space industry really became a massive highway network. And it's a network where many different actors coexist, right? And that's maybe the difference compared to a road network, is that everybody's actually on the same space and coexist. And here what you can see is a superposition of the traces of the American satellites, Russian satellites, Chinese satellites, and French satellites in one single image. So this is a place where if something happens, it affects everybody. And in the history of this industry, consistently, we have just been placing things into orbit, but we have removed very little, which means that over the past few years, we added every year new objects that started failing in orbit. And they fail in orbit not so much because people that do them don't do a good job. They fail in orbit because the environment is very harsh. The satellite goes out of atmospheric environment and goes into a zero atmosphere environment. There's very strong temperature curves. There's solar flares, there's space radiations. It's a very, very harsh environment for electronics and for hardware to operate in this environment. And over the past few years, from the beginning of the space exploration, we reached a point where we have more than 5,000 of those non-functioning objects, whether failed satellites, satellites that don't work anymore, or rocket bodies, used rocket bodies that are uncontrollable in orbit. And beyond that, we have a huge amount of fragments, which are fragments from collisions or from explosions of satellites, which can be due to a leftover of propellant or batteries. There have been close to 600 fragmentation events from the beginning of the space industry, which create this environment with a very dense cloud that becomes every year denser of debris in space. Every single one of those objects rotate around Earth once every hour and a half. They fly they orbit at about 28,000 kilometers per hour. And at this speed, they represent a very dangerous projectiles for other objects that are in space. So we came to the point where we realized that this environment is a little like a very high-speed motorway network with a huge amount of cars, and where the number of cars just exploded by 16, but that doesn't have any tow truck. So you can imagine if you would have the complete car network we have today without a single tow truck around, because it's too difficult to do them, then you would have cars everywhere. You would have broken cars along the road everywhere. And the first car that would have been made, the first tow truck that would have been made, most people would say, oh, that's ridiculous, because it can only remove one failed car. And this is just a drop in the ocean. But essentially, what is needed today for this industry is to build up new services, new ways to operate in space. And in these new ways, you need a way to interact with satellites that are already in orbit. And this is typically what ClearSpace has set to do. We started working on a solution where we can actually pick up a debris in space. And in 2019, ClearSpace has won a tender with the European Space Agency to collect one of their space debris and remove it from orbit. And the objective of this mission is to demonstrate first that it is possible to capture a non-cooperative object in orbit and remove it. And to do that, it's a little, it's got this little James Bond touch, actually, in the way the mission goes. It's as we developed a large clamp that is able to embrace the object in space. So the ClearSpace One mission has as objective to pick up an object that is called a Vespa upper part, which is a payload adapter from the Vega launcher that has remained in space since 2013. There's many more of those objects that need to be served, but one first mission had to be done to be able to demonstrate that. What the European Space Agency also did is they actually procured this mission as a service. Actually, it's space debris removal as a service. And the reason why ESA did this is because ESA realized that it's necessary to break a gridlock between technology development financing and policies. As our space industry is evolving really rapidly, and when you say, well, see what's going on with large constellation is accelerating dramatically, we have to rethink the way we operate in space. And this became really obvious for the European Space Agency. So it has to be in the future possible to not only pick up a failed satellite that is uncontrollable and remove it from its orbit, but it could also be possible to actually repair a satellite or refuel a satellite. Or, for example, pick up a satellite in one given altitude and bring it somewhere else where it has to be for operation. So there's a real need for a change for that kind of services. And this is what we have been working on for the last few years. The first years of the ClearSpace One mission and the mission of ClearSpace has started in academia in Lausanne in the EPFL, the Swiss Institute of Technology, where we have been working on those kind of technologies for several years. And then we spun off into a startup beginning of 2018. We think that when we look at the future of the space industry, that kind of services is just a new industry. It's a new industry necessary. It's a new type of services that are necessary and that will grow to a point where it will just be a natural thing to find a tow truck in the middle of space operation, and actually to not find one, but many that will all be able to serve more than one satellite or serve multiple satellites. So for us, when we look at the future, one thing that has been driving us is the fact that we believe that is the responsibility of our generation to make sure that future generations will be able to actually operate in space and continue dream of space exploration as we could do it when we were kids and as we grew up. So this is really what drives us. Our mission will fly by 2025. We are working on other projects in parallel and progressing rapidly in a collaboration between a Swiss startup and several large space industry companies to lead this project and making a reality. Thank you very much for your attention.